Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you today. We're going to continue to study the book of Isaiah, and this time, Carlos Mendoza, and we're going to be studying Isaiah chapter 41. My brother Morea Lesur did Isaiah chapter 40. So today we're going to actually start to study chapter 41. We're approaching to Rosh Hashanah. We're really excited that we're approaching this amazing season. So I recommend that you download our publication 100 Gates, 100 Shofarot to prepare for Rosh Hashanah, and also on shofar.tv. Or also you can download the publication, will have the publication on Amazon, Simanei HaMashiach, that it is available also on Amazon. So you can search for it, and if actually you download the publication, you can get a special gift from us if you send us an email video tutorial. So we're really close actually to get to this season of Rosh Hashanah, to be close to this amazing year. We're going to start the year 5783, but we're just very close now for this. So we're going to be discussing some of the things of Isaiah chapter 41. I'm really glad to be with you this evening, and I recommend to open your Bibles and go to Isaiah 41. It's a very Isaiah 41 is a really long chapter, so I'm not going to be able to cover everything because there is a lot of information, but I will try to cover as much as possible. For me, it's interesting that Isaiah 41, um, it is first talk about many different things. One is the first part is of Isaiah 41, just giving a resume about the chapter, is about the trial of the nations. Then later on, they talk about the lessons that Abraham gave us. We're going to enter into that. We're going to actually explain some of these. Also, the part of Israel, my servant. Actually, this is one of the explicit passages in the Bible that actually talks about that Israel is the servant of the Lord, and we're going to explore a little bit about that and what it means, and what it means in connection with the Messiah. Also, there is a part. The part actually talks about uh, that the Jacob of Israel has not to fear about what is coming to the Lord, that there is always a future redemption, even there is punishment, and the nations um, are against Israel. There is going to come a time for a redeemer that is going to redeem the Jewish people at the end of times. Also, it talks about different parts about that they feel uh, Israel being destitute and different things, and then at the end it talks about the judgments of that is going to happen, etc. So we're going to actually cover some of these parts, and I'm just going to focus, as I say, it's a really long chapter, so I won't be able to cover. But I wanted us to go and explore this chapter with you. So first of all, I'm just going to start with prayer. Lord, thank you for this day of Shabbat. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be in this time that we can delight on your presence, that we can study your word, and we can hear your word, and we can understand better and better the different parts of the scriptures, and we can understand who you really are. Lord, open our hearts so we can understand who you are, and we can have a better relationship with you. In the name of Yeshua, amen, amen. So we're going to actually start, and we're going to go there. We're going to actually start in the first chapter of Isaiah 41. So it says something like that. It says Isaiah 41, 1 to 2. I'm using the complete Jewish Bible here. It says, keep silent before me, coastlands. Let the people replenish their strength, and let them approach. Then let them speak. Let us assemble for judgment. Who has raised from the east one? Who is who is just and call him to be in his service. He hands nations over to him and subjects kings to him. His sword reduces them to dust, his bow to driven straw. This is what it says in chapter 1 and chapter 2. Interestingly, these passages, it open actually to these passages that is approaching a judgment from the nations. God will come together, as it were, and we shall see which is truly strong. For they say, I do not have the strength to redeem my people. This is a commentary of Radak, and they say that either God is too weak or Israel is too sinful. This verse declares that neither is the case. So we're actually seeing here what is going on is opening the chapter, talking about this who has the strength to have, and he hands the nations over him and subjects the kingdom over him. This is a very important passage to look upon, because it's going to actually open the chapter, and it's kind of it's like God testing ground, who has the strength and who is the ruler over all these nations. It actually is Adonai, is God. God is the ruler of everything, and he's opening that he is the ruler. This says, delivered the nations to him and subdue the kings before him, who had made his enemies like dust before his sword. Actually, we're going to chapter, let's put it here, chapter 3 and 4. He's pursued them, passing on unscanned, hardly touching the path of his feet. Whose work is this? Who has brought it about? He who called the nations from the beginning. I, Adonai, am the first, and I am the same with those who are last. The coastlands have seen and became a friend. The ends of the earth have trembled. They have approached, and now they have come. So in this chapter, these verses 3 and 5, he's establishing that he is the one. He is the first. He is the aloof, the first one, related with the letter Aleph. Okay, he is the first. Also, we remember in the messianic implication that Yeshua said also, I am the first and I am the last. I am the Aleph and I am the Taf. I am the first and I am the last. So it is important because he's appealing with the divinity. God is saying itself that he is the first. But in the book of Revelation, we have in, I think, chapter 21, we see, chapter 22, I think 21, 22, he's saying, I am the Aleph, I am the first, and I am the last. Because this is repeated in other verses also in the Hebrew Bible, when God is said that he is the first. So if Yeshua is implying that he is the first, he is the last, that makes him, by essence, divine. And there are many other passages where we can say from the New Testament perspective that actually Yeshua is divine, and the divinity is also really important to acknowledge, because in these verses it seems that God alone is the first and the last. But how it could be that Yeshua is the first and the last? The only reason is that he actually is a divine being. He is divine. He's part of God. So that's something really important. Also, when he says that he is the first, and he is the last in chapter 3 and 4 that we were reading, also is important. In this says, in other, who have proclaimed generation from the beginning. This, I am the first. That's 4. And so we have to understand that connects Yeshua to the divinity, because God is saying itself, I am the first. So I think this is an important opening passage. It's important to read when we read the whatever chapter we're reading, we're studying a verse into the Bible. Is very important to actually understand all the context. Also, I always said that you have to read verses before. So it's good actually, if you're studying, for example, chapter 41, it's important for you to go back and actually study chapter 40 and chapter 42 to give you context in the same way that you're studying, let's say, Isaiah 53. It's good to get a context by studying Isaiah chapter 52 and also 54 to kind of get kind of the knowledge of what you are actually reading. And because chapter 40 it talks about the God being eternal, and it says here Hashem is the eternal God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not worry, he does not tire. There is no calculating in his understanding. So this is opening the passage. So chapter 40 it's closed in this way. So you on chapter 41 actually it start talking that he has dominion over the nations and subdue the kings before him. Who is this person? Who is, that this God who created everything, who is eternal, because that was established already in chapter 40. So when you touch chapter 41, it's logically continuing that conversation that you have. The thing is, like, the establishment of the chapters and verses was just later on in the Bible. When in the time of Yeshua, they didn't have verses or anything like that. The only reason they recognize the different sections was because the poses that when you see a Torah scroll, the only reason you know that you are in one Torah portion and another is because the pauses that have in the text, the spaces that have, that's when you conclude a section and you continue with the other. But at that time, there was no quoting like Isaiah 41 or anything. You basically, the people who have knowledge about the Bible could actually memorize it like Paul does, and he talks about that verse. But at that time, many of the scholars, they just memorizing complete passages of the scripture they studied or they were hearing. Also remember that at that time, the scriptures were recited publicly. So you didn't have Bibles as we have today, because it was very, very expensive. Only 50%, around 50%, Bart Ehrman, scholars said that the people in the Bible have a percentage between 12 to 50% of people could read and write, and the other percentage of people that were totally illiterate. So that means that the common people that were there, that's the reason they went to the synagogue to listen to the section of the Torah, but also the section of the prophets. So the prophets were read into that was what was so important about going to the synagogue, because that was the only exposure you have actually to hearing the word of God every day through the different Torah portions that they were established. So you will be able to actually listen to the whole to the Torah. That was the only way you can actually go when you were on a pilgrimage feast. You went to Jerusalem, and there was the Torah was recited, and there was the duty of the Kohanim actually to teach the Torah to the people. That was their duty, and then that's one of the reasons what we have the different places established throughout the Torah, so the Levite could teach the people about that. So I'm just saying all that to kind of give a context that people just at that time they were just hearing the word of God. They were going to the synagogue and they were listening to these passages, but not many have access to actually read the story. So unless you were really rich and you have your Torah scroll, at least you have to have, as I mentioned in other studies, you have to kill like 50 animals to really have just the parchment enough to read to have a Torah, meaning like a book of Isaiah or of the prophets. So it was extremely rare the people who actually have this knowledge about the Torah, because you needed to go to a yeshiva, to a school, to actually have access to these, or somebody who has access to this. The only way to actually do it is through a teacher who had vastly knowledge of the Torah, and that's what you see Paul really educated. He was a student of Rabbi Gamaliel. He could actually recite entire passages of the Bible. And anyway, so that's all that is really important, because the people is going to be hearing these words, and they are going to meditate. But it was more a hearing kind of style when we're doing all that. So anyway, so that was they established chapter 40, and it talks about God, about how the eternity of God, what is eternal, is key. And then he opens in chapter 41. He's just talking about this. That is really, really important. So we continue our study, and in this part that I was telling about being the first, I think is really, really important, because Yeshua talks, as I mentioned, in the book of Revelation, also this notion that says, and then we move to the next section that I think is very, very important. Isaiah chapter 41, 8-9. But you, Israel, this is one of the explicit passages. It's not the only one, but it talks about this. But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I chosen, descendant of Abraham, my friend, I have taken you from the ends of the earth, summoned from you in the most distant parts, and say to you, you are my servant. This repeated, you are my servant, you have chosen and not rejected. This is very, very important, because Isaiah is giving these also warnings, but at the same time he's telling Israel, it is not that I have done with you. Many people today said, Israel is done, is nothing more, and sometimes the nation say, well, Israel is, they are rejected. I grew with the idea that Israel was actually rejected, but it's not the point, because actually he's saying here that Israel, the nation that I have chosen, personally, God chose Israel as a nation to give an offspring to Abraham, and this love to Abraham will come later on, the Messiah. So we have that passage is very, very important, but it is repeated twice in this section from 8-9, that it says, I, Israel, my servant, and to say, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not reject you. God has not rejected Israel, contrary to what many people say. It's like, oh, it had been rejected, or it has been rejected for a period of time. Now that they didn't, like some people used to say, it's because they didn't believe in Jesus, so now they are rejected. And this is contrary to what actually the prophet and the scriptures are saying. It's not that I have chosen you, I have not rejected. God forbid that God rejects Israel, because nobody will be able to have a redemption. If Israel is rejected, that means that nobody of us can ever have, everybody of us will be rejected, because he make an eternal covenant with Israel. So it's really important for us, for whoever is listening to me, maybe it's the first time, is Israel is always being chosen, and it has an eternal covenant with God. And this is very important to emphasize it. And the verse is emphasizing it too here in the Bible. So we're now going to be a little bit deeper into here, so we can understand a little bit better what we are studying today. If you actually see, it says, but you, Israel, my servant Jacob. That's the part that I wanted to emphasize. It's a whom I have chosen. Those what we read, and we put it here on the Hebrew is Beata Israel. Thee, this word thee means my servant. So it becomes the word Evet, that is servant, and it's thee. It says, Yaakov, Asher Becharticha, Sarah, remember, is a word that it means seed, that I've chosen my seed. Abraham Ohabi. That Ohabi means it comes from, it's not really my friend, is the one who I love. So, because it comes from Ahava, or, love, and Habib is the one who I love. It's not really in this translation that we are seeing my friend, and that's the reason it's so important to actually start reading or researching the researching into the Hebrew text, because we are going to see so many amazing things that sometimes what happens is the translation chooses certain word. Being a translator is really hard. Sometimes I translate words from English to Spanish, and sometimes it is really difficult to choose the right word from the English to Spanish, or vice versa, because sometimes that doesn't have an equal translation. So what you tend to do is kind of choose something. So being a translator is really difficult. So what we need to do is start studying the Hebrew text to actually see things like that. So we say, oh, in the translation, you say my friend, but in reality, it's the one who I love, and we could go to, kind of the grammar, and you can actually see. And there are many things into the Hebrew that is um, that you cannot really translate it, because there is on a passive tense, or something, or a continuous tense, that they don't have really equal into that. So the translator is trying to do the best they can. And actually, you read commentaries like Rashi, you will see that actually they talk about these different verse tense, and they say this is in present participle or something, and it will tell you that word and what it means. They make some notations in that when you're studying Rashi on some of these commentators, because they are seeing something in the grammar that is unusual, or something that repeats in other places. So they wanted to actually point out something. So studying the Hebrew and the grammar in Hebrew, it's vastly important as well to understand the original languages, so you have the opportunity. So here, this concept about the servant of the Lord, and this is explicitly, and I'm touching this because we're going to see a little bit later on. We see other passages where it talks that Israel being my servant. So what it means. So coming back into this, this verse is that God is chosen Jacob of Israel as a descendant of of for his descendant, and also say Abraham loved God based on his awareness without being taught by his parents or this environment. So this is a commentary here that I'm reading, and it's very interesting. The Jewish nation, however, are his offspring for their parents. They sustain them. So this is very important, that in the beginning, Abraham had to figure out everything by himself. It's like God in Lehato, go from this land, and that's when he started speaking to him, and then he had to figure out this relationship with God. What is God? Because at that time, Abraham, according to the Midrash, he starts to understanding what is to be that these gods. There is a midrash that talks about a story that some of you may know, but there is a story where that the midrash says that actually Abraham's father, he was an idol maker, so he used to make idols for the different deities in the different deities and all that, and then he constructs. So one day what he does is like, okay, well, he smash all the idols in the workshop, and then he puts a hammer into one of the idols hand, and then he leaves. So the father comes and see all the idols destroyed. And of course, it's very upsetting because it's the way he's earning his living. And say, he asks Abraham, why this happened? Why all these idols have all this broken stuff and all that? And basically he said, like, he was him. Say, but these idols, they cannot move, they cannot do anything. How you can say that this idol broke everything? It's like, that's your answer. Like, these idols, they don't do anything. So Abraham start figuring out through seeing the sun and the moon head first. There is also a midrash that says that he started worshiping the sun, and then he worshiped the moon, and he understands that they don't have any power. So he say, maybe there is something more. Maybe there is a God, an entity that is beyond the sun and the moon. So he had to go to that process of understanding by himself this presence. So it's really, really, really cool that Abraham was doing that, and they have this environment. But the Jewish nation, it has actually fathers, and as the instruction says, my servant, meaning that these people who are totally devoted to God's service will not thought of personal gain. Jacob refers to those who are God's chosen people, even though they may not be elevated themselves to short decree that they will be chosen for their own merits. So remember also, why God, that's a question that we have to ask, why God called this my beloved, the one who loved me? Because Abraham loved God with all his heart, and that's what we are going to see in this coming commentary. Also, I wanted to say, we're talking about here about Israel being a servant, but also we see other passages like Isaiah 53, or actually the following chapter, and Isaiah 42, it talks about actually the Messiah. And actually in this chapter, it's talking about the Messiah being the first. So we have these first verses, as the reason I pointed out, they're talking about the first, but at the end of the chapter, he's talking about the Messiah, this Redeemer being the first. And then in chapter 42, say, behold my servant, whom I shall uphold, my chosen one, whom my soul desire. I have placed my spirit upon him, so he can bring justice to the nations. He will not shout, nor raise his voice, nor make the voice of hit. So the question is, who is the servant? Because clearly in 42, is talking about the servant, the chosen one. And this is recognized to be the Messiah, or the future redemption that the Messiah is going to have. And there are many rabbis who say and recognize, this is my servant, the chosen one. According to Rashi, the servant of Jacob, my chosen one of Israel, is the entire Jewish nation also. But also is identified by the Targum, Radak, and Abarbanel as the Messiah. We're talking about chapter 42. But I wanted to make the point because we're going to see that there is a parallel. Sometimes it says, like Isaiah 53 to me, when I read it, and I just read it like minutes ago before actually doing teaching, I was actually reading Isaiah back, because it's always pondered me every time that I read it. Many rabbinical interpretation today, it says that Isaiah 53 talks about Israel. The servant of the Lord is Israel, and they went to all this punishment and all that, and it's Israel because you have chapters like Isaiah 41 that we're studying today, that you have different parts of that says that actually Israel is the servant. Well, who is the servant? If it Israel, or is the Messiah? Who is the servant of the Lord? Rabbi Shapira makes a good point. They say, well, why is not both? Actually, in the back of the Ahavat Ammi Synagogue, that we use for Shabbat prayers and everything, in the part I really like, it has a statement of faith. If you have not read it, read it. It's important. It's a statement of faith that we have here in Ahavat Ammi Ministries. It says in number 7, the Mashiach represents the Yehidah, the singularity with Israel, and any attempt to separate Yeshua from the Jewish people reflects anti-Semitism. I like that the Messiah is the Yehidah or singularity with Israel. So the Israel cannot be separated through the Messiah, and the Messiah cannot be separated from Israel. Both are Yehidah. They're an unity, an entity. Together they go together. So I want to look about that. There is a unity into that regard. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's important to mention, because it's not either or. Like or one is the Messiah. The Messiah is a real servant, or Israel is a servant, because we see explicitly in both sides. And there is also an opinion in chapter 42 is Isaiah. And I wanted to bring this commentary, for example, in Isaiah, because a lot of people will say, and commentaries like Rashi will say, well, it is Israel. And the problem about many of these medieval commentators and identifying as Isaiah as a messianic passage is because they were also surrounded with Christianity. So they didn't want to attempt. So they say, well, it's better to actually identify it with Israel to not get kind of in trouble. And in a sense, yes, it is Israel, but I think it's also talking about the Messiah. I think it's talking about both, because we're talking about this Yehidah, this unity that has. The Messiah is the representation of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people the representation of Messiah. Messiah is united with the Jewish people. So the sufferings of the Jewish people, imagine what kind of sufferings can go through the Jewish people. They went to different expulsions, different countries in Spain and Portugal. But also, they went to the Holocaust, like the most horrific persecution in history that someone ever had. What happened in the Holocaust is something that we cannot even imagine that somebody could endure. So yeah, we see the suffering of the Jewish people and say, well, yeah, it's parallels with the Messiah, with the suffering of the Messiah. It's parallel the timeline of the people, because both are descendants of Abraham, and the second of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. So I think it's very important to say it actually talks about both. Sometimes it's explicitly to one, and like Isaiah 42 for me is really the first part is talking about the Messiah, because it's talking about specifically for me Isaiah 53. Every time I read it, because it's not talking about a nation in this case, it's talking about specifically Ish, a man of sorrows, and he is talking about an Ish. So he's not talking. So I don't know how you can make the argument from the Pashat that a man can become a nation. But I think the problem is to make it that is exclusively Israel or exclusively the Messiah. So in this, for example, there is a commentary here on, I'm saying in the Talmud, in Sanhedrin 90 BB, they're actually in this section of the Talmud, they are discussing the names of the Messiah, and they're saying, what is the name of the Messiah? And Rabbi Shela said, is Shiloh, and then Rabbi Yanai is called Ginon, and Rabbi Hanina, talking about Hanina. So each one of them, Menachem also, and he forms an acronym. And actually, this is, if I remember correctly, it's actually in the Return of the Kosher Pig. But in this last part, it says, and the rabbi said, the leper of the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in his name, Arisi stated, indeed, our illnesses he did bear, and our pains endure, and yet did not esteem his injuries stricken by God and afflicted. And Isaiah 53:4. So explicitly here in the Talmud is telling us that one of they're identified, one of the names of the Messiah is the leper, and the leopard is united with Isaiah 53:4. So yeah, there is an interpretation, there is an ancient interpretation that Isaiah 53 parallels or is talking about the Messiah. So we're not just talking about just the servant being in Isaiah 53. And I get into all these because I think it's important to discuss. People sometimes have questions. If Isaiah 53, the rabbi said that he just talks about the Messiah, I'm saying about Israel, and they never talks about the Messiah. But this, for me, from the reading of the Pashat, and they're not the only. I think Targum Jonathan on Isaiah 53 has a reading that talks about the Messiah. And that is a very ancient reading. So the idea that we identify Yeshua suffering through Isaiah, it's a very messianic passage, but also is linked also to Israel. So I don't think we have today say it's either or. I think it's both. And I think Rabbi Shapira has said it before. So it's important for us to study this, but I just wanted to demonstrate you that, yeah, is what I'm trying to say with all this is they are parallel. The Messiah and the people of Israel, they're part of a Yehidah or a unity that they come and go together. So what it says, I wanted to bring this quote and go back to Abraham now that we explained a little bit about the servant and the parallels and the Messiah and all that. I wanted to go back to this part of the Jerusalem Talmud because I found it really interesting about Abraham, because it says the one who his love, his friend, somebody who God really exalts and love. Why is so beloved from God? Is because it says there are 7 kinds of religious people, okay? This passage of the Talmud, and I'm going to explain it. So it's the religious on the shoulder, the religious on credit, the religious on balancing, the religious of what is deduction, the religious should I get when I release my guilt. So these are different people. So this is the different motives that people have when they do something religious. Okay, something like say of the mitzvot. So some people are going to see over their shoulder what they're doing, what not. Some people are just getting credits. So every time that they do something bad, they just have a credit. So when they do something bad, the good things, uh, the good things do credit balance to them. There are others that uh, they don't realize the guilt. So we have these different motivations what people do things. But and there are other 2 people. It says there are others, and I have seen other passages in the Talmud where they compare actually Job and Abraham. And it's very interesting that this passage they talk about, this says the religious for fear like Job acted because of fear. That's what Job did the mitzvot according to these opinions of the rabbis. They say religious, but there are religious people from love, like Abraham. No one is beloved as much as the religious from love, like Abraham. So people, the idea is that people have different tendencies of what they do things. Sometimes people, they do it, hey, I'm going to do a bunch of good stuff. So when I don't do something or I sin about something, I have more things on the good than on the bad. So that's their motivation. The motivation is to have, like kind of a sore pass that when they do bad things, it's kind of balance it out. And there is some people who they have different ways to do it. In this case, Job did it because of fear. Some people don't sin because they're fear. They have fear from the Lord. And what he explains these passages is that actually the fear that Abraham had, it was beyond that. It's that fear from the Lord that gives you love. He really loved Hashem with all his heart, and that's what God called him. Is my beloved one. Is the one that I love. Is because he loved equally. The love is corresponding. God, Abraham loved God, and God loved Abraham, and that's what we see this really beautiful relationship to one another. So what is the lesson about that we can apply it is that we can be like that. And actually this is expressed in the New Testament as well. Okay, So we see in the New Testament in Romans 4:13. I have two different versions because I think that the complete Jewish Bible don't do it as a good job. They say, "For a promise of Abraham, he said that he will inherit the world did not come through legalism, but through the righteousness that trust produces." In Romans 4:13, in the English Standard Version, it says a little bit better. It says through the law. And I want to explain it because sometimes of you are reading actually a Christian Bible, a Christian interpretation. It says through the law, That's for the promise of Abraham and his offspring that he will be heir of the world did not come. Through the law, not come through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. What it means that the Talmud already explained us that the motivation that Abraham has was by faith, and he acted by love. He enacted because he was going to get punished by God. He didn't act because he wanted to obtain something from God. Many of us sometimes they do these kind of things. We wanted to do things because, we're going to get something from God. So I just do good things, or I want to be punished, or I wanted to be in a good standard, or these seven things, seven religious things that actually they're telling us in the Zohar is how as people we act when we act religiously. But what is explained us in the New Testament is that he was not justified, he was not focused on those kind of things. Abraham went beyond that and he acted by love. That's what we understand in this chapter 41. That's the reason he was beloved and his offspring. It's amazing when you study the life of Abraham. I think is one of our biggest example, Abraham, about how he conducted his life. Imagine, without having anybody who told him about God, he was the first one who actually had a direct contact with God. I won't say the first one. I will say the first one from the patriarchs, because remember that we have other people interacting with God before, but Abraham was the first one to hear from God and start having a relationship with him, a direct relationship with him. And he started actually to be the first patriarchs, and then he was the first actually doing converts. So there is a lot of, that's the reason when the New Testament talks about so much about Abraham, because there is so much to learn about him, and it's really, really remarkable and amazing. So God really the Talmud is telling us like different ways that people perceive that we perceive faith. So the question is like, which one are you? Which one are you? Are you the one who is, balancing reduction? That is it says, are you the one who is deducting the points, no? Or the one that you realize when you are guilty, and the one, that have, the one that is from the shoulder, that says that carry his deeds on his shoulder? Are you one of that? Or the one who are making credit? So which one are you? Are you one who is acting by love, genuine love, because you love the Lord and you just wanted to do and serve others and treat because you wanted to be the image and representation of God? Or you're the one who are just giving credit, or you are so fearful that you don't want to commit that? And that's kind of the attitude that we need to change. And this is the challenge that Abraham has. And I think that's what chapter 41 is teaching us. And that is what he's saying, he's my servant, the way that Abraham, we have to become servants like Abraham. What is the best way to serve? The best way to serve is doing it through love. Through love is the way we can serve genuinely, because if not, sometimes we're trying to obtain something from somebody. Sometimes we wanted to that all obtain somebody favor with somebody, but this is the way to do it. We have to follow the example of Abraham, and that's what the New Testament is teaching us in Romans. That I wanted to go. It's not through. It's what explained. It's not through legalism or through Torah. Is it's for righteousness of faith. The intention of his heart, his kavanah, was to serve the creator of the universe and nothing else more. And that's what's so pure about Abraham, and that's what God tested him to. The reason he tested us 10 times is because he wanted to see, we're approaching actually to Rosh Hashanah, and we're going to be studying soon the Akedah in Genesis 22, the dividing of Isaac. And what it's all about, that testing, is God wanted to know where God, and it's interesting because the testing that Abraham had, it was not even about him. It's what God knows everything, goes beyond space. But I think the testing is more than for God, because God wanted to test us. It's of Abraham to see how much, for Abraham to realize how much he loved God. That's another perspective, right? We always think, oh, God need to tell. Why he tests us if he knows he knows that we're going to fail or not. He put us a test. As a teacher, your students, right? And you teach them or whatever, and you kind of anticipate on your students or the level that are having and their understanding. You can know which ones are going to pass and which ones are not. I'm saying that's a level teacher. In mind, God has all the power and all the knowledge. So why he's testing in this way Abraham is for Abraham to realize, how important is his relationship to God, and so that changed a little bit the perspective. But that's another story. But I think it's interesting how much God loved God, and I think he realized at that point how much he loves God, and it's really, really interesting. And then let's go to Isaiah 41:9. I'm saying we already touched a couple of chapters, and it has been long because it's so much information. We go to the Hebrew and we analyze, and we go to different parts. So on chapters on chapter 41 verse 9, it says, "You whom I drew from the ends of the earth and called from the far corners, to whom I say, you are my servant." And it's repeated as I say, "I chose you, I have not rejected you." And it's also repeated the word that abadi, and it's my servant, and he's put it here. So I think I found it really, really interesting as well here. And we can see in the Hebrew, let's see, Asher Chesechatecha Miksot Haaretz Umeatzeila Kiratecha Baomar Lecha Avi Ata Verjaticha Belo Measticha. So this is what it says, Juan drew from the ends of the earth, because the idea is that we have been in exile for really, really, really long time. And God is going to draw us from all corners of the earth. He's going to draw us in from the four corners of the earth, from the exile that we have here, to the ends of the earth. And that's where we pray to the Amidah. That's what we pray. We pray that God, we regather the Jewish people from the ends of the earth. And that's what is promising God, that he has not forsake the Jewish people, and he's going to one day regather them. That's the big promise that the prophets made, that he's going to regather people that he has not rejected, and it's going to be an end of the exile. And it's in chapter 41:10, it says, fear not, okay? Fear not, for I am with you. Be not frightened, for I am your God. I strengthen you and I help you. I help you with my victorious right hand, for my victorious right hand. So do not fear. Do not fear. That's what God is telling us. Don't be frightened. I am your God. I am with you. Many of us live with a lot of fear about the future, about different things that are happening in the world, and we read the news and the war with Ukraine and this and that, and the state of the country and recession or whatever, and we start fearing. But it says, God, do not fear. I strengthen you and I help you. The idea is that God will help us to overcome whatever situation we are having in this life. That's a promise that He is making. Even the so they say, I help you with victory. Even if you are in the exile, as He's mentioning, I am not reject you. You are in exile. You feel like you are rejected. You feel like you don't have any hope. You feel like nothing else. But I am here with you, and fear not. So this is a very important part as well, to think about how God is doing everything in our life. Then I want to go to chapter 41 at the end of this, because I don't want to cover everything that is up. I think those verses are extremely important because the promises they make and how talk about being Israel the servant. But I found it fascinating, the chapter 27. So we're going to read it in a little bit. Isaiah chapter 41, verse 27. It says, I am the first, and he says Rishon. Actually, it says Rishon. I am the first. It's like Rosh Hashanah is the first. It's like Rosh is the first. Rishon, the first. They say, I am the first to declare that Zion, to send Jerusalem a messenger with good news, with a messenger. Okay, I am the first to declare it to Zion. So, who is this first? So we have to ask a question. I am the first to declare it to Zion, to send this messenger with good news. Who is this messenger that is going to be with the good news? That's a good question to ask. Okay, to Zion, and it's repeated, to Zion, to send to Jerusalem. Is both. Okay, who is this person? Okay, so we have some commentary. It's important to also see which different commentaries to see what we're talking about here. It's important to see what the sages are telling us about how are they reading the text. It's not only that you are reading the text and you, oh yeah, I know the messenger. Who is this? Is what do the sages, through for the blessed memory, have been doing through different times, and where they're coming from, and what they have been discussing, because they have been talking about these passages for thousands of years, what they're talking about. And it says the first to come here, it's Rashi makes a commentary here. It says, I will, and behold, they are here. The first king to pay attention to Zion was King Cyrus. So we behold that the elders of Israel are ready to ascend to Zion and wants his permission. So he's talking about, well, this messenger, because remember, they call Cyrus, they call a Mashiach. That's crazy, right? This pagan king. It's not someone who is actually as an Israelite from the Jewish people. He's not. He's a king from other nation, but he pays attention to the nation of Israel. So there is a commentary here on Rashi that says Cyrus is the first one. He is that messenger who comes. But also is also talks about when the people returns back from the exile as well. Well, I have a commentary that I found really interesting also as well. That talks a little bit about different. So in Shemot Rabbah 15:1 says, another explanation to you, it shall be the first. It comes from Exodus 12:2. So this is referring to speak to the Holy One who is called first. As we established, remember that I am the first and I am the last from Isaiah 44:6, but also in these verses in 41, is talking about, we just read, he is the first. And Zion is called the first, and it says, as the throne of glory, exalted from the beginning, so is the place of our sanctuary. So there is making this, in this midrash, is, okay, God is the first, because he says in the scriptures, also we read it in our Bibles, right? We have God is the first, also is called Zion, is called the first in his throne of glory, exalting from the beginning. So the place of sanctuary, that's Jeremiah, but also is called the first, because remember, he was the firstborn. Okay? And says in Genesis, the first who won emerged Rudy. Okay? Then he continues, says, the Messiah is called first, as it says, the first one of Zion, behold, sorry, behold them. And he's quoting from Isaiah 41:27, the one that we are reading. Said, let the Holy One who is called first come and build the holy temple, which is called first, and exact retribution for Isaac, who is called first, and let the Messiah who is called first come on the first month. And it says, this month shall be the head of their months. What the Midrash is talking about? That's pretty wild, right? So it's very interesting, very, very interesting, because we're actually getting into the season of Rosh Hashanah, and he's talking actually to be coming on the first. What first? Actually, have the idea that I have now is that actually the Messiah could be born actually in Rosh Hashanah. How do I know? There is a scholar who actually interpreted Revelation chapter 12 as the different constellations, and he makes a case that actually Revelation chapter 12, it's actually a conjunction of different constellations that tells you when the Messiah was born. And if you make and you trace all these constellations exactly, there is only one day that it could happen. And so anyway, so that's very interesting. And if you see when that window happened, it happened in Rosh Hashanah in 3 CE, I think. That's kind of the conclusion of this. It's very, very interesting, and it's Dr. Heiser who makes this claim about Revelation. One of the biggest scholars on the Bible these days. So very interesting. So what I'm telling all that about Rosh Hashanah? Well, if the Messiah, let's say, was born in Rosh Hashanah, that it makes sense. Why? Because the creation of the world, right? It is the anniversary from the creation of the world, the creation of Adam, the creation of the day. I remember about the ark. So there are many things happening in Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah is a characteristic for the coming of the King. So it makes sense that being born on that day, he will return on that day. It could be very interesting. At least if he's not going to return in that exact day, for we know by tradition that is going to be the inauguration of the king. That's the reason we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is about the inauguration of the king, and it has a more meaningful thing knowing that Yeshua is the Messiah, that we are going to come and congratulate the king. And it'll be cool that even, we can congratulate the king in his own birthday and the birthday of creation. It's really cool. And I like something that Rob Bernstein says, because a lot of people always say, "Oh, it's Sukkot." No, it doesn't really matter when he was born. There are different opinions that I have here, and different way to calculate it, and from different passages as well. But I think, and some people say Sukkot, and the first one I always thought about Sukkot, and Rob Bernstein changed a little bit my mind about that, because Sukkot is a time that you don't have a census in the pilgrimage. Basically, is what he says. So I think it's very interesting, because that's true. You're not going to have a census in the time of a big pilgrimage, but everybody's going to be in Jerusalem. You have to do it in a time before then or after that. So he's open actually to that period of time. So he's a very one who open is like, well, that makes sense. You cannot be that. So anyway, so I found this information from Dr. Heiser. Really recommended. You can search on YouTube his videos. A 10-minute explanation about the constellations is interesting, but does really matter? Because a lot of people start taking all these things into the internet and videos, and he was born in this, and Jonathan Kahn says that he was born in. Doesn't really matter, but I think it's interesting that the inauguration of the king, it makes sense that the birthday of Messiah could be actually on Rosh Hashanah. Could be really, really cool. So if you think about Rosh Hashanah, we're preparing for the inauguration of the king. And what the Midrash is actually explaining us is really cool, is that the Messiah, who is called the first month, so he is the one who is going to make all these rectifications. It's very interesting that this passage also is talking about Isa be called the first. Let the Messiah, who is called the first, who is going to rectify what? Going to rectify Isa. That's what I see. Because when I see Isaf, why the Midrash mention Isaf the first? He couldn't mention about other kind of first. He's mentioning about Isaf, and then he's talking about the Messiah. And check how this says. It says that Isaf, who is called the first, and let the Messiah, who is called the first for the first month, he says he will be the head of the month. So, meaning that, just giving us a clue, to be the Messiah is one who is going to rectify Isa, who it's called the first, is going to build the sanctuary. He's going to do all those things. And this fits perfectly what we are reading here in chapter 41:27. As I mentioned, this says, and I will read it again. The first come to Zion will announce, behold, they are here, and they will send to herald to Jerusalem. And I see that there is no man, and then among them there is no counselor who I may ask, who can respond with a word. Behold, all of them, their deeds are worthless and empty and molten images, but the wing are nothingness. It feels like, I'm going to send that because it's the state is really is so bad that I'm going to send to Jerusalem this herald, this message of hope and good news, even that the deeds are worthless. We always remember that God does the redemption for the sake of himself, not because our actions, we're not worthy really, because if he will be for our deeds, it will be done, right? This is not because our deeds, it's because he wants to do this process of redemption. Our deeds count into this, yes, but if we basically balance out all the things that we have been doing in the world, well, we just, it will not be. He says, the passage here, it says their deeds are worthless and out. Their molded images are but the wind and nothingness. That's what it says. Is how this close the chapter 41. So this is chapter 41. I hope that you have a very good study and you can reflect some of the things that we talk about this passage. And I hope it will be a blessing for you and all of you. I hope you have a Shabbat Shalom to everybody of you. I hope that you have a blessed day, and I hope that you can keep studying with us the book of Isaiah, and you can learn something, and you can internalize some of the words that we spoke. And I hope that you have a happy New Year for all that we're entering into Rosh Hashanah year. This year 5783. So, Lashana Tova, all of you have a good year, and I just wish you a very, very happy new year, and I hope that you can come with us on this Rosh Hashanah Seder that we are going to have. Sunday, it's going to be Sunday night, 7 p.m. You can come and you can follow us through the different. It's going to be teaching, it's going to be worship, and it's going to be many other things. It's wonderful. So please come with us and have this tradition of the Seder. I learned the Seder many years ago, and it has been a blessing to me and to my family. So I hope that you also have a very blessed day. Thank you very much. Have a very blessed day, and come to the Rosh Hashanah. We're going to have also morning service, Rosh Hashanah, Monday morning. So I hope that you come with us. Shabbat Shalom, all of you. Bye-bye.